get into this BS policy called redlining that created housing segregation and pretty much jacked up the American dream for black folks, let's take it back to the 1930s. America is in the thick of the Great Depression, and y'all, it was bad. Around 1/5 of the country was unemployed, and nearly everyone was dirt poor. Along comes FDR with his New Deal. Dude was trying to revitalize the American economy, which created what we now call the middle class. But not so fast. FDR's New Deal would cement racial inequality in America for generations to come and birthed two programs that enforced housing segregation: the Public Works Administration and the Homeowners Loan Corporation, known today as the Federal Housing Administration. The PWA created affordable housing, and surprise, surprise, the agency created separate public housing for black and white folks, greatly segregating cities. Now let's talk about the Federal Housing Administration. The FHA created low-interest mortgages to build homes across the country. This agency actually built the suburbs as we know it. They basically said, hey banks, if someone applies for a mortgage, go ahead, build them a house. Even if they don't pay you back, we'll still guarantee a loan. Unless they're black. The FHA's manual literally prohibited the occupancy of properties except by the race for which they are intended. But before we go any further, let me call on a friend to break down the legacy of redlining. The world-renowned white peopleologist from the roots, Michael Harriot.
What's up?
He's a nerd IRL. He's earned a master's degree in macroeconomics and even taught race as an economic construct to some college kids. What's good?
Feliz, what's going on? Good to see you in these Unpack That screeds.
How are these racist-ass government policies tie into what we now call redlining?
The term came about because the federal government, Uncle Sam them, created color-coded maps that told banks where they could give out housing loans. The green sections were a go, whereas the red sections, typically where black people lived, were deemed too risky. Even well-off black neighborhoods like Sugar Hill in Harlem, where black people like Zora Neale Hurston and Duke Ellington lived, were off limits to banks. Aside from financial barriers, there were actual physical barriers to prevent black people from living in white neighborhoods. In the early 1940s, there was a 6-foot-high wall in Detroit because redlining, and it's still there today. The Fair Housing Act put an end to redlining in 1968, but we know it ain't go down like that. Banks across the country have been caught using redlining maps as recently as 2015. And get this, most redlined areas are still low-income black and brown neighborhoods.